everybody. It's Karen from Divorce Workshop. We're having another divorce workshop talk. Today we're going to invite Chloe in, Chloe O. Workbook will be coming out from Divorce Workshop this October. Hello, Chloe O.
Hi, how are you, Karen? It's nice to see you.
Good to see you. So I'm excited to have you back. And today we're going to talk about international divorce, travel arrangements for international families, which is
Yes.
a lot in one sentence to say. But I was thinking about this morning that before I get into that, though, please give me your little bit of bio about
Oh,
yourself.
yes. Okay. So my name is Chloe O. I'm a certified divorce coach. I live in London, but I specialize in helping people through divorce who are in some kind of international context. So either they're expats, a U.S. couple who moved together to China, or they're a binational couple, but there is an element of international considerations in their divorce. And my specialty is really helping people to divorce out of court. So I support them through negotiation techniques, communication, and also conflict de-escalation strategies to keep the divorce negotiation going and to achieve the outcomes that they want without ending up in front of a judge and delegating that decision making.
Which could save you a lot of money.
Absolutely. Money, time, and
and
stress, and all the destruction that comes from the stress and tension that exists between divorcing spouses. If it's litigated, it gets even worse and it impacts the kids even more.
So anyways, back to what I was saying. I was thinking this morning, we know that when you're even cohabitation breakup or separation, divorcing, there's a lot to it, right?
Yes.
And what I'm learning from you is that these international divorces, there's an extra layer of everything.
There really is. There's a lot of things that get a lot more complicated that you don't have to worry about as much when you're both from the same country and divorcing in that country. And travel arrangements is one that's very sensitive, especially with the kids.
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today because, as again, I don't have any idea. When I thought about it this morning, I went, "Oh my goodness, there's going to be some lot to consider."
Well, yeah, but by definition, there's going to be a lot more travel than if you were both staying in the same country. The children are likely to be going back and forth, for the holidays most of the time, sometimes more, depending on the distance. So you want to make sure that you plan everything out. And like with everything in divorce, the more you can agree upfront when you're not in the eye of the storm and in the situation that's causing a conflict, the better you'll be later on. So it's about nipping those potential conflicts in the bud early on by agreeing on a robust co-parenting plan that plans exactly how those kind of logistics are going to happen, that in order to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Are there a lot of challenges with that? What do you find?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I actually have a template that I provide for free on my website for long distance co-parenting, because if you look at the templates that are available online that are designed for families that are local to each other, there's a million things missing in the concept of international divorce. The obvious one is the travel back and forth of the children. So if you have one parent in each country, who is even taking the children back and forth, depending on their age? Who's covering the costs? Even logistically, if you live a little bit far, you've got one parent in Europe, the other one in the US, they can't come for the day to drop off the kids.
Right.
They have to stay overnight. Who covers those expenses? Where will they stay? Do they stay in the other parent's home, or do they go into a hotel? Do they go to the hotel with the children, or do they just go on their own? So all of those logistics are a lot more complex. And then there's a lot of questions around passports. That's a really sticky point. Who keeps them? The number of people I have seen just get into these ridiculous legal battles over who keeps the passports. It's just really mind-blowing. But I think the passports end up becoming a symbol of the children, and you don't want to let go. But you need to agree who's going to keep the passports, who's in charge of keeping them up to date so these trips can happen. Who covers the cost of renewing the passports? If you need the other parent, my kids are American and French. The French passport I renew on my own. I can go to the embassy and have it renewed. For the US, I need their dad there, but their dad doesn't live in the UK. So now we need all this array of paperwork, and that takes time and it costs money. Who takes care of all of that? How how do I guarantee that I have those papers in time for the day I set for the appointment at the embassy? So there's a lot of things like that that need to be just agreed early on to avoid a massive argument 2 days before the appointment at the
Mm-hmm.
embassy because the other spouse didn't send the paperwork.
Yeah, it sounds, as I said at the beginning, much more complicated and
It
layered
is. Yeah.
for already people that are having a struggle with just living in the same city and trying to co-parent.
Yeah. I mean, you have to think about a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily be something you'd be concerned about. Another big one is technology. If your children are far away, you want to be able to reach them easily.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of technology does the other parent need to give them so that they can be reached easily and directly? But you
Mm-hmm.
have to take into consideration the age, your own values around giving your child a device at X or Y age. So that can be quite complex, just allowing the parent who's far away to have direct access to their children. And most importantly, for the children to feel that they can have direct access to their other parent.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. You just deal with it when and if it arises as your children grow up. If you were local to each other, but suddenly these things become really important when you have this international relationship.
I would assume that there has to be some element, which is hard in divorce, of trust with all this stuff, though, right?
I think there does need to be an element of trust because at the end of the day, you're letting one of the parents kind of take the children away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so hard for people to accept. But if you're able to negotiate those arrangements, one of the keys is going to be to demonstrate to the other parent that you're not doing that to alienate them or to,
Mm-hmm.
put contact between them and their children, to really reassure them that all your arrangements plan for that ongoing contact. Make sure that your culture is being maintained in the
Mm-hmm.
household far away, your language potentially, and just really try and reinforce the fact that it is in the children's best interest to move abroad, but it doesn't mean that they're losing their other parent.
Yeah.
But that's, of course, emotionally loaded, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any other challenges that you see with, like, the obvious, flights? Do they go on their own, as you said? Does
Yeah.
the other parent come with them? Who pays for that? The passports? Actually scheduling it. Is this hard to schedule this co-parenting plan when you're living in two different countries? Is that more
Well, I
challenging?
think you have the same challenges as if you're local in that sense, that you have to agree ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be with mom these holidays, with dad or mom or dad, whatever the other holidays, and have that predefined. And the more you can have that structured, the better.
Mm-hmm.
But with international travel, you have to be more flexible. So, if your ex lives 20 minutes away, you can say handovers are at 6 p.m. on a Saturday. If they live further away, well, there's flights. They're not always the same times. It depends on the prices. You might choose one airline over another.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
can't guarantee that you're going to have the children there by 6 p.m. on the Saturday. And so having that degree of flexibility and also agreeing where the handovers happen. I have a client who his wife lives in Italy. He's in the UK, and
Mm-hmm.
they do the handover at the airport. That's not very pleasant for the child to literally be passed on from
Mm-hmm.
one parent to the other.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you arrange for a little bit of overlap without the other person missing their flight back? And so
Right.
there are some logistics to include, but it does require a lot of flexibility because there's that extra element of uncertainty that comes from international travel.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you, if not today, maybe another time, and how to transition with your children on these. Like,
Yeah.
how do you, I'm from a divorced family, and I'm thinking it was hard enough on transition days, let alone you're not going to see that parent for quite a while.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of grief, and I'm thinking, I'll see you in a month or two, right? Like, better what the schedules are like, but I'm thinking, I'm putting myself in those children and going, as much as they're looking forward to seeing mom,
Mm-hmm.
because they've been with dad all summer, they're leaving and they're missing. Now they're not going to see dad until maybe Christmas
Yeah.
and then
Right.
vice versa. When they've left for the summer, they don't see their mom. I'm just throwing out a schedule, I think, in my head, but I'm just thinking, I'm sure there's a big element of that comes up where it's like, how do you transition the kids to you not get anxious and upset about it as well, because you're grieving as well, because you're
Yeah.
not going to see. So I'm sure there's a huge
Yeah,
huge component with all
I
this as
think
well.
the adaptation is harder for everybody because those chunks of time are
Hmm.
longer. When you don't have your children only every other weekend, it's easier to keep yourself busy for that weekend. If you don't have them all summer, suddenly you're faced with the fact that your children are not there. It's much more
Hmm.
obvious. And for the children, as you say, saying goodbye and knowing that you're going to see the other parent within a few days is very
Hmm.
different than knowing that it's going to be weeks, if not months, until you see them again. So the support for the children, and again, that ongoing access is going to be really important in maintaining the
Hmm.
day-to-day interaction.
Yeah, like a Zoom call or
Yeah.
a FaceTime or
I mean, there's so
what?
much technology
Yeah.
out there. I mean, in a way, as much as it has a lot of downsides, it does enable a lot of things. You can play video games online together. You
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
speak, read stories. There's apps for everything these days. So there's a lot of ways of making sure that you can remain part of your child's life on a daily basis. You can do homework on Zoom together with them every
Hmm.
night,
Hmm.
chat at the
Yeah.
same time. It's really about finding the arrangements that work best for the parents and for the child based on their age and how they've reacted to everything.
Yeah. So it goes back to what type of parenting plan they're going to. But is it the same way? Like you really want it detailed and thorough?
Yes,
Um,
I think that's a golden rule in divorce. The more detail you can put in your arrangements, the better. It doesn't mean that you're not flexible, that you can't change things, when things evolve. It just means that you have a baseline that you've both agreed to. And so it
mhm.
takes that element of ongoing negotiation every single time about how this or that is going to happen and work out. You have a clear agreement as to how you're going to proceed, knowing that there might be times that you have to change it.
So flexibility is huge with this international
Especially with kids.
co-parenting.
I mean, kids
Hmm.
grow, they change, you discover they have an illness or they have a learning disability. I mean, there's so many things that can happen. You need to be flexible because things evolve and their feelings, towards the divorce and towards their other parent might change as well. So it's important to acknowledge all that.
Yeah. Is there any other things that you see with international co-parenting and the traveling stuff that that is that we need to talk about?
Well, I think one of the big ones is when there's a new person, when
Mm,
one of them needs someone new, and especially if it's the parent who's far away, so who doesn't usually live with the children.
mm,
It might be uncomfortable for the children to go. They want to see mom or dad that they haven't seen in whatever number of months.
right.
And then there's this person there that they don't know and who hasn't been part of their daily life. And it can feel a bit like they're robbing them of that time that they had been looking forward to with their parents. So, handling the introduction of a new person, how soon the children can be left alone in their care, how soon they'll be going on holidays together. Again, if you can look at that and agree on that before the new relationship has started, before all the emotions come into play,
Hmm.
and look at it rationally with regards to what's best for the children, and you can document that, then you have a fallback position. It doesn't mean you're going to sue the other person if they do it differently. It just means that you've both agreed that that was the best way. And it's a starting point for the conversation when the situation arises.
Yeah, because most people do, research I think states quite a bit of few people do remarry and do couple up again after divorce. So when you're in both the same city, you know, you can do it more gradually. You can go out for ice cream and you can go to the park and meet this new person. It can be gradual. But as you're saying with international, it's like you can't really do that really.
No, difficult.
So
Otherwise,
it
it could
makes
take several years to get that person, introduced into the children's lives.
yeah. I never even thought of that. It's a really good point.
There really are a lot of things that need to be thought through and that require
Hmm.
somebody prompting you. None of it is rocket science. It all makes sense.
Hmm.
People tend to not think that far ahead. And unless someone's prompting you to, how are you going to handle that? And how would you do it if this happened? Most couples don't anticipate. And then that means that when the situation arises, they again have to find an agreement. They have to negotiate a solution that works for both of them. And that's a time usually where emotions are running quite high.
Hmm.
So it's not ideal.
Yeah, that's why, that some people like that's why they would hire you though, because even for me, I'm hearing new things from you that that you wouldn't even think about in a normal divorce.
Absolutely. And a lot of the value behind the template that I've developed, this long distance co-parenting template, is to prompt people to think about all the
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
working with a divorce coach, you can actually dive deeper and really
Hmm.
think of the detail what exactly do I want to document here?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that it's phrased in the right way, that it's clear to everybody, and that everyone's signed up to it. And also just agreeing how often you're going to review that document. There's just a lot of things to consider. And without a guide, you're kind of winging it, and you're taking a chance of making a mistake or not thinking something through, and then being stuck with an arrangement that doesn't work for you or your children.
Yeah. Is it pretty like is it pretty like, this is just another question. Like, is they all over the world? Like, is it, you know, like, is it France and Italy, or is it like, do you have like US to Europe and
Yeah, I have very long distances. I had a man who was in Japan, and his wife was moving back to
oh
France.
wow.
So you can have very long distance. And of course, if it is a really long, time difference, travel
Hmm.
arrangement, all that, it all gets a lot more complicated. Because even in terms of being able to speak to your kids regularly,
Hmm.
it may be that by the time they get back from school, it's the middle of the night for you. And so it doesn't work, So trying to work around that is going to be that much more complex. And, bringing the parent who's far away. So in my example, he's in Japan. If the kids and the wife are living in France, even with the best of wills, if the
Hmm.
mom wants to pull him into parent-teacher meetings, she's got to find a teacher who's willing to have a meeting either at 7 a.m. or at 10 p.m.
Hmm.
And so it gets all a lot more complicated, and they need to think about, okay, so in that case, maybe we will be recording those meetings. So you'll send me questions ahead of time, and I'll send you notes. But just having that ironed out just makes everybody more comfortable, and it allows everyone to be involved.
Yeah, I think it's great that what you do though, because I don't think many people know, right? I think that's why we need to spread the awareness that this
Yeah,
international divorces happen.
yeah.
Remember I told
More
you
and
last
more.
time I remember I told you last time I'm like, oh, I don't know anyone that's international. I'm like, oh my goodness, my sister's international. Like like I'm like, yeah, I have one in my own family, right? So yeah, of course it happens, and people fall in love all over the
Yeah.
world. It's just people still divorce all over the world. So
And even
um
if you're in the same country, that some countries are very big. Canada is an example, right?
yeah,
You can be in
pretty
the
big
same
over here.
country, but you can change time zones. You can be, a
Hmm.
5-hour flight away.
Hmm.
So the same challenges come up, whether there's a border between the two or a country border between the
Hmm.
two. And the fact is, if you're far from each other and the children can't easily go see either parent, on a regular basis, you're going to have those challenges. And that's when you want to get that expert
Hmm.
advice and guidance
Hmm.
to avoid making mistakes and to make sure that you've planned for all the details.
So depending on their scenario, how many times, if it was just about the co-parenting, like,
Mhm.
because that's one aspect, there's many aspects of divorce, but say they want to come see you because they want to really help to get this really good co-parenting plan sorted out and figure and dive deeper, as you said, how many sessions would they need, do you think?
So it really depends, because I sometimes have people come to me as a couple,
Hmm.
which is really the ideal scenario, because then we can just put their heads together, work through the plan, discuss item by item, and make sure that it's all documented. It gets trickier. It can take longer if I'm working with one of the two, and then they have to go speak to their
Hmm.
ex and negotiate and come back with their counter proposal and then think it through and then go back. So it really depends on the context. But, technically, if everyone's cooperating and everyone's sitting at that negotiation table, it's a matter of a couple of hours to,
Hmm.
to, to put it on paper and to agree it all. The problem is when there's disagreements, then it can take a lot longer.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing of divorce, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
That's why lawyers never give you fixed prices, because you never know how long it's going to take.
Yeah, and they can't promise you anything, right? Because
Exactly.
it's two people that are trying to get divorced. But is there anything else before we wrap up about this topic?
Well, let me just check my notes, because I did make a few notes. Um, I don't think so. I think, just something to highlight, that it's not just the logistics, it's also the cost implications. Don't forget the cost
Mm.
implications. And there's a lot of small hidden costs that people don't think about. So we all think of the airline tickets, that's an
Hmm.
obvious one.
Hmm.
But the one, for example, I mentioned around where does the person stay if they have to stay overnight upon dropping off the children or picking up the children, and who covers that
Hmm.
expense, who covers the expense of renewing passports,
Hmm.
of visas. I have a client whose husband is in Mozambique.
Oh
Her
wow.
children need a visa every single time they go. That costs money. It takes time to go to the embassy, get the visas sorted. You have to do it several weeks ahead. Who carries the weight, the financial weight, and the responsibility of making all of those things happen? And the best way to avoid missing anything is to really kind of imagine imagine your story that you're going to go tomorrow, you're going to take your children to Mozambique for this trip. What are all the things you need to do? What are all the things that you need to anticipate? What happens if the plans needs to change and there's a cost to changing your plane ticket? All of those logistics need to be anticipated. And as much as you can agree early on how that's going to happen, the less conflict you'll have later on when those situations arise, because they always do.
Yeah, I can see that parents that are in the beginning, it'd be quite overwhelming.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And that's why having the template is quite helpful, because it's almost like a checklist, and you deal with it piece by piece, one thing at a time. It doesn't feel like this insurmountable amount of arrangements you need to.
I always say it's like the ant eating the elephant in divorce, right?
Yeah.
So we just chip away at it a little bit. You'll feel better if you do a little bit every day, and then because you'll get through it. It's just overwhelming.
And I think that's the case with a lot of things that are overwhelming, right? Whether it's losing weight or buying a house, just one step at a time. And so if you can break it down, work on one issue, then think of the next. If you look at the whole list, it feels like, oh my God, there's so much for us to discuss and to agree upon. And also keep in mind that not everything is applicable to everybody. So again, if you're close by, you could be in a different country, but still 2 hours drive.
Right.
So just think about what it all looks like, and whether every single element is relevant to your situation.
Yeah. It's like everything. Everybody's divorce is unique and different, right?
Absolutely. So, and the situation and your children are all different. So you have to take all of that into consideration.
That's another thing, right? The children are all different, right? Yeah. That's another topic, right?
Absolutely. You have to take into account their needs and their personality and their reaction to the divorce as a whole, their attachment to each country. There's a lot to think about, and they really need to be at the center of all these decisions.
Best interest of the child.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. So it's not about the parent time with the child, it's about the child's life.
So before we wrap up, if we have any comments or questions, just put them in below. Otherwise, what do you have up and coming? So you can tell everybody.
I have a book coming, so that's been my big project over the last several months or a year now. I'm writing a book specifically for expats with a lot of information around how to prepare for your divorce. So the idea is to give people all the ammunition they need to know what to expect, to prepare adequately, and to make sure that by the time they actually start the process, they have clear expectations and all their ducks in a row, so that there's no nasty surprises and it goes as best as possible.
I think it's going to be important read for those international people.
Well, there's a lot of golden nuggets in there, and that was very much the intent, is to share some of those insights and help people just avoid those big mistakes that I see so many people do, that I made myself in my own international.
Yeah, I think that's why it's kind of your calling, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think for a lot of us, when you have that experience firsthand and you see the impact that it has to have to deal with several jurisdictions, to have to deal with long distance parenting, with properties in different countries, you gain an awareness. And if you can share that with others and help them not have those nasty surprises, then, it's beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. For me, I felt like a fish out of water. Like I had no idea. And I'm from a divorced family, and I still had no idea. So
that's quite common.
I think that's, yeah, right.
Until we get there, right? And you might hear stories around you of people who've gone through it and what happened to them. But as you said, every divorce is different, and so you can't compare, and you can't expect your divorce to be the same to your neighbors or your friends.
No. Well, this has been great, as usual. Lots of good stuff here for people and everybody out there. So they can contact you. If you want to just throw out.
Yeah, I always offer a free discovery call. So if anyone feels that they need support, reach out. On my website, there's a very obvious link to book that discovery call, or drop me an email, and we can have that initial chat. And then it's a good chance for people to give me an idea of their situation, and for me to gauge whether I'm the right person to help them. And then if we both feel that it's the right relationship going forward, we can work together and try and make sure that those big mistakes don't happen.
All right. Well, it was great having you on, Chloe, again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Karen.
And take care, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.